Greetings and salutations, everyone. Welcome to a throwback review, which touches mainly on the film which started it all, and later where the franchise is, where it's been and where it's going in general, since I know many of you may have seen commercials or trailers and heard the overall buzz about Alien Romulus, and if not familiar, maybe wondering what all the fuss is about. How many of these movies are there, and should you even bother with Romulus at all? So, let's begin with the meat of this video, which is mainly about Alien from 1979, starring Sigourney Weaver, Tom Skerritt, Ian Holm, Veronica Cartwright, Harry Dean Stanton, Yaphet Kotto, and John Hurt, and of course is directed by Ridley Scott. If not familiar, even though this movie's been around quite a bit now, the synopsis is as follows. The crew of a commercial spacecraft encounters a deadly life form after investigating a mysterious transmission of unknown origin. First off, yes, this is from 1979. This is way back, so at the time of this video, that's, I believe, 45 years ago, if my math is correct. And the fact that they are still trying to make films in this universe, that should really tell you kind of the impact that this film has had on cinema. Now, so as the synopsis says, and to elaborate a little bit further, the crew is in hypersleep heading back home and is woken to investigate a signal, which may be possibly a distress call, maybe of alien origin. At any rate, they are sent to check it out. Now, they come across this alien via an egg on a crashed alien ship of some sort, which wreaks havoc on their ship as they're trying to leave, and it's killing off the crew one by one. Now, normally I would leave out and avoid any spoilers, but since much of this story has been parodied and mentioned in pop culture over the decades, it's pretty much safe to go into a little bit more detail. I'll only leave out a few things. So anyways, basically, this alien comes out of an egg, latches onto a guy's face, and it kind of like puts him almost into like a coma as he's brought back onto this ship with this thing stuck to him. He's alive, but completely unresponsive. If they try to remove it, it tightens its grip around him, and if they try to cut it off, it bleeds acid which can eat through the hull of the ship, which is definitely bad when you're traveling in the vacuum of space, but luckily, it eventually kind of just falls off and dies on its own, and the man who it was on wakes up and eventually regains consciousness. Everything seems fine. Shortly after, this alien, let's just say, emerges from his body, as if his body was kind of being used as like an incubator, or like I believe there's like an ant or a fly or something which actually does something similar, like laying an egg inside of something, it hatches and eats its way out. I think maybe a bot's fly, or there's another one that kind of takes over it's really gross. Anyways, so this thing is now loose on the ship, and they need to try to track it down, catch it, and throw it out of the airlock, since they can't simply kill it because that acid would destroy the ship. This is a really great setup, having this limitation of the acid blood, and the fact that everybody there is just a worker. They are not military. They're just a commercial crew. So they don't have weapons. They don't have a way to deal with this. They've never seen anything like this, of course, so they need to improvise. Now, while this one is a horror film, a sci-fi horror film, there's a lot of tension in this one as well. It has more of a thriller feel compared to some of the others. A lot of sneaking, searching, evading, etc., and always on the edge. And they have some other aspects that kind of are thrown in to mix up this story a bit as well. Now, while the beginning of this is all about the mystery of the signal, this ship of sorts that they discover with these eggs, it quickly after that turns into a horror thriller, keeping us on the edge of our seats the entire time. And if you check some YouTube reactions, you may see that people checking this out for the first time, it does hold up remarkably well, both in this overall feel of that production design, the special effects, and the performances from this cast, all of which have moved on to much bigger and long careers, including Sigourney Weaver, who even came back 3 more times for the sequels. And yes, this one does have a very satisfying, wrapped-up ending. But then a few years later, a young director by the name of James Cameron came in to create a sequel for this. Now, at the time, this was seen as a bit of a mistake, because if he failed, it's all going to be on his shoulders that he screwed it up. And if he succeeded, Ridley Scott, the director of the original, would probably still get all the credit since it started with him. But everybody was wrong, because while there was, of course, indeed money to make with just creating any kind of sequel, he did it in such a way that succeeded beyond just making that money, but really, put his name first when it came out from all of that success, that he created one of the best sequels ever made, in my opinion. So as we dive into these sequels, there will be just some brief info that I'll give you on the general feel as we close into Romulus and what I've seen about that one so far. So, The second film, Aliens from 1986. Yeah, they just made it plural because there's more than one alien this time. This one is much more of an action than a thriller. So we go from horror thriller to horror action. We get an expanded cast which consists of colonial marines. Years later, going to the planet where these eggs were originally found in the first film, with Sigourney's character kind of tagging along as a consultant. For this one, things are opened up quite a bit more. We have hundreds of these aliens now, and these characters are instead trapped on the planet trying to fight their way off, just trying to survive. Meanwhile, there are, let's just say, some ulterior motives about the company who owned the freighter in the first film, trying to get their hands on an alien, on one of these aliens to either do experiments, maybe weaponize it or something. Just they want to get their hands on it. Now, what's really surprising is that some viewers actually enjoy this one better than the original because it's more action-packed. And the extended director's cut has a lot of depth added to Sigourney's character as well, and it's a really good one. But then years later, we get Alien Part 3, just called Alien 3. This is perhaps the least enjoyed, or at least the least well-received out of all of these entries, let's just say. So this one takes place on a prison planet where Sigourney's character lands after escaping at the end of Aliens. So one alien has survived. This entry feels more dramatic, more claustrophobic. We have the issue of there being like no weapons on this prison planet, it being very remote and so on, but it's very slow, it lags. The production was plagued with issues. You should actually check out the channel Minty Comedic Arts for his video on Alien 3, since it's very interesting. But the film wasn't really all that well received because it was so slow, but definitely check out his video. And he also did one for Part 4, which is called Alien Resurrection, came out just a few years after that. Now this one takes place even further out, and it's written in part by Joss Whedon. This one takes place on a space station where there are experiments underway, like genetic cloning experiments trying to bring an alien out of Sigourney's character, let's just say. Kind of getting back to the initial interest in the aliens, some militarization and doing experiments and such. It's kind of a mishmash of sorts. We do have some Ron Perlman in it though, and some action, which is pretty good, and Winona Ryder joins the cast. The only real good thing about this one, of course, is that we do get back to the horror roots, and less of the dramatic ones that were really slow in Alien 3. It's very like gross and gooey, has a lot more action in it than Part 3. It's worth checking out, but definitely nowhere near as good as the first two films, with its main praise being simply that it was better than Part 3, at least in most people's opinion. Then things take a bit of a turn because there is a popular series of Predator and Predator 2, and people had been wanting to see an alien showdown against a predator for a while. It had been done in comics, and we did eventually get a PG-13 Alien versus Predator. Now this is mainly because it's Alien versus Predators. It's not humans being killed, not as much human blood, so they were able to get away with a PG-13 rating. But it was just okay. You know, it has to do with this almost like a ritual that the Predators go through with hunting these aliens in some temple in Antarctica. It's really far-fetched. It was just okay. It wasn't terrible, but I've definitely seen better. And then they made Alien versus Predator Requiem, which takes place, from what I recall, like in Middle America somewhere. I didn't finish watching this one. It did not hold my attention. So I kind of gave up. But then years later, they eventually came out with Prometheus. Now this one is a prequel about that crashed ship from Alien. So it sets up everything that leads up right before Alien. It was another one that was pretty good. And then in 2017, we got Alien Covenant, which is another prequel kind of set within that same world, from what I recall. Now, Prometheus and Covenant are both worth checking out, but they have an extremely different feel from the other films. In my opinion, they were a bit more slow, a bit more dramatic, but they definitely fleshed out the story and the history about these creatures quite a bit. Though some of it still, even thinking back, was confusing to me. And honestly, I really do need to revisit them both before going into any more detail. But I will just say that by 2017, I figured, well, I have Alien, I have Aliens. Those are really great. I recently even got them both on 4K remasters, which both of these look and sound amazing. And I could still see checking out Alien Resurrection every now and then maybe, and maybe once a decade revisiting Alien 3 just to kind of see what they did with that story. It's not really one I'm excited about, as you can tell. But anyways, now they still, I still had some to enjoy, with all that. And then I heard about this alien Romulus, and I was kind of confused that they were going back to that alien title and kind of steering away from what they'd done with Prometheus and with Covenant. But at the time of this video, Alien Romulus is coming out this week. Now, I don't know a whole lot about it, but I am pretty excited about it. Because from what I understand, it's regarding some scavengers investigating, I believe it's like a space station, I think, and they're stumbling across these aliens. And it takes place after the original Alien, but before the sequel, Aliens, at least from what I've read. And that it's its own separate standalone story, which I'm excited for, as it seems like the best direction to take this, and that somehow, and like somebody new to the Alien franchise may be able to just begin with this one, though I would still recommend checking out Alien and Aliens just to see if you like these kinds of films. But with what little trailers that I have seen about Romulus, it looks to have a lot of horror in it, a lot of action, and there's a mix of practical and CG effects. That's just from what I've seen so far, with this one leaning heavily back towards the feel of Alien and Aliens, which I feel is really what the franchise needs. Because looking back on this franchise, I really appreciated that after the first one, when they made Aliens, they went in a different direction and they put a lot more action into it, make it more exciting and open things up. And even that on Alien 3, they at least tried to bring in a little bit more drama, even though I felt like it didn't work that well for me. And that with Resurrection, they leaned back into horror, getting a lot grosser and throwing in a little bit more action, though it was a bit jumbled here and there, and there's a little bit too much comedy. And with those more recent ones like Prometheus and Covenant, I do appreciate that they got almost philosophical, though I felt they were a little bit slow. I appreciate that they seem to specifically try to change things up with each entry rather than just repeat the same thing over and over again, for better or worse. But looking at Romulus, it seems like they may have dialed into this great mix of what we love about the first film and leaving out what we didn't, while also adding its own style to it. But we will see, as I hope to get out this week to the theater to see it, as looking at the trailers and just the little bits I've seen so far, it seems more than worth checking out. And speaking of checking out, thanks for checking out this little bit of a longer video of mine for Alien, which again, this 4K remaster of is absolutely amazing. Definitely worth picking up if you are a fan and you have the 4K TV, as is Aliens. Like I said, it's a very long franchise, which if you were only dimly aware of what it was, some of those specifics, hopefully this will give you enough information to know what to expect going in should you decide to finally check it out, or check out the rest of this before going into Romulus, or to at least know enough to know if maybe Romulus is worth you going out to the theater to see what looks like it's going to be a very horror-driven and action-driven film worth seeing up on the big screen. Anyways, that's all I got for this one. Thanks for coming by and for sticking around to the end, as it really does help out quite a bit. I know this was a longer than usual video. If you enjoyed this, please give me a thumbs up and consider subscribing if you're not already subscribed, and checking out my back catalog and all that stuff. I usually put up videos anywhere from 1 to 3 times a week, usually between 5 to 8 minutes. This one's just a little bit longer. Anyways, thanks again for coming by, and I will see you in the next one.